Is it possible for me to just speak over here? I feel more comfortable. We live in the 21st century, where governments understand the importance of human freedom. And although time has changed, although changes have occurred that have reshaped our world, one thing remains constant: the duty of the responsibility to protect its citizens. And we'll show to you how online gambling is something that the government must restrict through two main arguments. But before I move on to these arguments, let's understand the policy under which Team Proposition proposed the motion. We propose banning online websites, and the violators of this law, who will be A, the creators, and B, the users, will be subject to heavy fines and may also face prosecution in the court of law. So having understood that, let's understand the two lines that Team Proposition will be expounded their case upon. Number one, how it is the responsibility of the government to disincentivize online gambling. And number two, how difficulties in regulation of online gambling open up a room for a variety of consequences. So what is the responsibility of a government? We understand the governments exist to give us human freedom, and this is the responsibility of the government. But at the same time, governments need to understand that they need to also strike a balance. And this happens in the case when governments ban public smoking, because they know that they need to strike a balance and they might at times be going too far. In the case of demerit goods as well, such as alcohol, ladies and gentlemen, what does the government do? The government knows that excessive use may harm the people. So what does it do? It tries to disincentivize the use of alcohol. And how does it do that? By increasing taxes. And taxes all in all reduce the ease of access that an individual may have. And we think, ladies and gentlemen, the governments all over the world recognize this principle, and we're only in firm affirmation of that. And having understood that, let's look at what happens in online gambling and how the online gambling increases the ease and thus increasing access to increasing access as well. So a person knows that he has to go and take a walk if he wants to go to a casino in Las Vegas. If a person is in another state, he also knows that he might go to a casino once in a while when he gets a holiday. When online gambling is made legal, when online gambling is prevalent, what happens? That person does not need to make that effort to travel. That person does not need to make that effort, ladies and gentlemen, to go to a casino. All that person needs to do is press one button and he is there at the casino. And we feel, ladies and gentlemen, that this all in all increases the ease of access. And this is something that we feel is harmful. Because the excess of everything is bad, ladies and gentlemen. Although we understand that gambling is okay for a leisure activity, but when the ease of gambling is increased, ladies and gentlemen, the dangers of gambling are also increased at the same breath. So you understand, ladies and gentlemen, that with excessive gambling, it is not only the person who puts his money at stake. You understand that a person might put his son's college funds at stake. So the person is not the only one who is being affected by this policy, but other individuals as well, his person's family as well. And you understand that it has been statistically proven by many studies that gambling is something that is addictive. And if something becomes an addiction, ladies and gentlemen, how do you cure an addiction? By reducing the ease by which that person is able to access gambling. And we're only following the same principle. And having highlighted how it is the government's responsibility to prevent excessive gambling, let's look at the nature of online gambling and the consequences that it would lead to. So you understand, ladies and gentlemen, when you go to a casino in Las Vegas, when you go to a casino in Nevada, you have to understand that you have to make an online presence. These casinos, ladies and gentlemen, are already heavily regulated. You need a certain license to open up a casino, and casinos in this case are heavily regulated. But does the same situation occur on the internet, ladies and gentlemen, where the ease of opening a website cannot be compared to the ease of opening up a casino? It cannot be, ladies and gentlemen. And having understood that, you also have to understand that if a person walks in a casino, there are certain tangible security measures that exist. For example, I know that there will be a security guard, ladies and gentlemen, who will check my identity. Does the same procedure exist on the internet when I can deceive another individual of my identity? When I can very easily use my father's ID card and bet millions of dollars, ladies and gentlemen? That can exist because there is no tangible way of confirming an individual's identity, as opposed to when an individual is faced by a security guard who I have to show my ID card and he will confirm whether I am the person I am claiming to be. But this does not exist on the internet. And more importantly, with the use of VPNs, with the use of proxies, ladies and gentlemen, the deception is becoming all the more easier. Because when a person logs into an online casino, he may be directed to, my location might as well be Netherlands and I might be in Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen. So what checks and balances can exist? We don't feel, ladies and gentlemen, that this will make the job of regulation easier. We already know, ladies and gentlemen, that regulating casinos is a difficult job, but these tangible barriers make deception more and more difficult. And if these tangible barriers cease to exist, we feel that regulation will be tougher. And when you understand, ladies and gentlemen, that the suspicious behavior is also something that you can prevent from occurring when you have a tangible presence within a casino. Now, a person knows, ladies and gentlemen, there are checks and measures that ensure that if an individual engages in suspicious activity within a casino, that person is kept. That person is you take action against that very person. But can that exist when the person is hiding behind a computer screen? No, it cannot. So if you see that a person is engaging in suspicious behavior, how do you tackle that when the person does not even have a tangible presence? We don't see, ladies and gentlemen, how you can do that when the person is only hiding behind a casino, hiding behind a computer screen. But more importantly, you also have to understand that ladies and gentlemen, that you do not know the flow of money when you're also gambling online, because you can take certain steps that ensure greater regulation on knowing where the money goes. And having understood that there may be a prevalence of black money, ladies and gentlemen, that may also harm the community. And for all these reasons, we urge you to vote for team proposition.
Okay.
Wait. Can you?
Sure, you're going.
Okay. Because I'm thinking I was going to say something. Yeah.
Okay,
we're done.
How much time do we have left?
You used up 120.
Okay,
Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
Do you need a timer?
Oh, yes, I do know.
Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 0.
I'll just stand here. Ready? You speak a lot about the balance that the government has a responsibility to strike. So, what is the threshold for when a government must ban something?
The threshold exists in this model because you understand that the harms of excessive gambling are too much. Because A, you need to stop this addiction, you need to stop people from
Right,
gambling.
I understand the harms of online gambling, but how are the harms of online gambling, say, different from something like alcohol that the government does not ban?
The government does restrict the use of alcohol, that is what we're doing.
Yes, but
we're not banning alcohol.
Right, so you concede that the government doesn't ban alcohol, yes?
Yes, it doesn't, but
So
it
then
still
what is
reduces the
right.
access.
So then what is the threshold for when a government should ban something?
There is no specific threshold that you have to that exists. It varies from case to case. In this case, we outlined certain harms that allow you to ban
Okay, then
online
things
gambling.
things like smoking harm people, correct?
Yes, and that
And
is
so
why
how is
you
on-
and
fine,
that is why you
fine.
increase taxes
Let's
that make
con-
smoking more
let's-
expensive.
Let's continue with this example. How is online gambling worse than things like smoking, worse than things like alcoholism that are not banned?
We think smoking is bad, we think alcohol is bad, and gambling also lies under the same idea. And therefore, if we restrict the use of smoking, if we restrict the use of alcohol,
Then
why
we-
not also restrict the use of gambling?
So by that line of logic, we should only restrict the use of online gambling, not ban it, correct?
No, what we're saying is that gambling should be restricted. We're not
But you
saying,
didn't-
and
but
online
did you-
gambling is
but-
one way
right,
of restricting
right,
gambling.
I understand, but did you strike a distinction between when we ban something and when we simply restrict it?
You have to understand that when the harms exceed too much, you understand, ladies and gentlemen, that at times you have to understand that structure
All right,
of
sure.
the internet
Okay,
is not
okay,
something that you
okay.
should. Yeah.
Next question is, I'm just clarifying your position. Your position advocates that we would ban online gambling in countries where offline gambling is legal, correct? Because you say offline gambling is fine.
We will ban online gambling in all countries.
Right, okay. Okay, let's go to your case. You'd argue that online underage gambling can occur because people can use their parents' credit cards, people can use their parents' cards, correct?
Yes.
Can't minors use fake IDs in casinos?
But that does not happen when a security guard is over there to confirm your identity, check your passport, and confirm whether you're 18 or 17.
Okay, final question is regarding the very top of the pro case that says that creators and users will face prosecution. Is online gambling banned today?
No, it isn't.
So why would you punish people who created the online
When
gambling
we make
sites?
it illegal, they are going against the law, and thus we will punish them.
Yes, but the creators of online gambling sites created the sites many years before they were banned, correct?
Yes, but they would have to shut down these websites, and if the websites still operate, we will punish them.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you.
Can we take some more prep? Just run prep, yeah, thank you.
There's so many ways to track this. Also, just me, just pushing
In terms of the risks. That's much better.
All right, opponents ready? Judge ready? Okay. We negate online gambling should be banned. Every time the government bans something, there's a threshold they need to meet. The difference between drugs and alcohol, for instance. We observe that in order for our opponents to truly negate, they must prove that online gambling meets the threshold that government set for what should and shouldn't be banned. Our first argument today is that countries that allow gambling offline would be committing a major violation of principle. It is hypocritical to allow gambling offline but then ban it online. Basically, what a government is saying is that the act of gambling is below their threshold of what is dangerous, so that's why it's allowed to happen offline, but then they're banning it online. This is completely hypocritical, and there are two impacts of this. Firstly, there's a decrease of government legitimacy. In order for a government to be legitimate, their policies must be consistent. Government legitimacy is extremely important because peoples will only listen to a government that they see as legitimate. The second impact here is that it undermines the ability of government to serve its purpose. A government is created to maintain order, setting a code of rules. An inconsistent government can never bind the nation together. Violations of principle are just as bad as a state of anarchy where nobody knows what to do. Moving on, our second argument today is that online gambling is less dangerous than offline gambling. In a casino, your senses are overwhelmed. You're enticed by alcohol and staff meant to target you in specific to spend your money at the establishment. With offline gambling, you're more likely to be with friends, encouraging you to stay longer, drink more, and thus spend more money. In the end, closing out of a window is much easier than leaving a casino, especially under the influence. Remember, an online gambling site cannot sell you alcohol. This is a major distinction in today's round. At a casino, you can be sold alcohol. At an online gambling site, they cannot sell you alcohol. You're not physically in a place where alcohol would be available from the site itself, and they're not pressuring you to drink to make bad decisions. Our third argument today is that banning online gambling kills a business. Online gambling is less dangerous than items which can cause short and long-term bodily harm, such as drugs, which are mostly illegal, and alcohol, which is mostly legal. The greatest harm online gambling can bring is the loss of money. However, banning online gambling would increase this harm tenfold. As you can see, killing a massive industry such as Zynga or Poker World, all these websites, ruins people's lives. They lose jobs, they go bankrupt, it pulls apart families. In fact, the net harm is even greater than that of online gambling, since a disappearing massive industry would harm an entire country's economy, not just individual harms. But back to the people and the harms on individuals. Let's look at our opponent's framework, where they say that they are going to punish people that own the websites that allow online gambling. These people didn't know it was illegal when they made the website. So basically what you're saying, you're going to increase these harms on the individuals, you're going to give them monetary penalties, you're going to give them jail time, you're going to pull apart families, you're going to harm these individuals way greater than they would harm anyone actually losing money gambling, and they didn't even know it was illegal when they made the website. This is a complete violation of principle. This is completely unfair to the people and is a retroactive way of punishing that we do not condone on the negative side. Now moving on to our opponent's case. To start, they talk about this balance between smoking and how a government decides this threshold. Let's talk about this threshold and compare drugs and gambling. For instance, let's see the difference. Drugs, there's immediate bodily harm. It can make you lose motivation, lose money, strong addiction. Gambling, you just see the losing money, the economic risk, okay? But we live in a world run by economic risk. For instance, the stock market investments, banking strategies, loans, etc., which what you need to accept when you accept the terms and risks to use in for instance, in an economic standpoint, it's the same thing with online gambling. You accept the terms and conditions. You accept the fact that you are putting your money at risk, and in society we don't ban things just because you put money at risk. That is something that is so prevalent. We couldn't ban every type of strategy that puts money at risk. It is so common, it is just makes absolutely no sense. The solution isn't to ban the product or industry that does this. The solution is to make it more clear that you're putting yourself at risk. You need to know that you're putting yourself at risk, but most people do when they enter an online gambling site because they accept a terms and conditions. Just like taking a ban from a bank, you wouldn't ban the process of granting loans. You would make sure people are more informed. In addition, it was clear in cross-ex that our opponents give no threshold for restriction over ban. They don't tell us why we should restrict something rather than ban it. They are giving us why we should ban something rather than restrict it. They're giving us no reason to actually ban online gambling. They're just kind of saying, oh, we restrict some things, we should try and restrict it, disincentivize it. So in the end, none of their case is actually very clear on that point. But let's talk about their first argument, how it increases ease. Let's remember that with ease of access, there's also ease of self-limiting. The point, as I say, it's easier to close out a window than to leave a casino. Just because there's easier access, just as it's harder to get to a casino, there's still the difference that it's safer and easier to lose less money by limiting yourself by just closing out of a window. They talk about how you can use a false identity on online gambling, but you can use a fake ID in a club, you can use stolen credit cards. It's the same concept, same principle, and you can still get away with it. A fake ID, they won't know the difference between you and the person that you're pretending to be, so this argument is non-unique to online gambling. Second of all, they talk about how there's no accountability of location through proxy servers. They can still check your IP address. This argument completely falls. It has no practical basis. They can still find out your location from your IP address, so again, you're not even going to be looking to this argument because it's not factually correct. correct. Just because you're using a proxy server doesn't mean there's no evidence of where you actually come from. If you need to be penalized, you can be penalized through the information from your IP address. So for all these reasons, we urge a common ballot. Thank you.
Everyone ready? Thank you for your speech. Do you believe that cigarettes have a negative effect on people?
Mm-hmm. Especially bodily harm. That's the
Do
biggest
you think
negative
that
effect.
the government should ban cigarettes?
I think there's a threshold there where bodily harm can be a problem. That
Do you
is
think
enough
the
to ban
government should ban
something.
cigarettes?
I mean, this is. I'm not going to decide
Yes or
on the
no?
threshold for
Do
you.
you
I
think-
mean, no, they shouldn't ban cigarettes
Why not?
because we're not presenting you with our own threshold. We think gambling is below that threshold. Bodily harm, there are things that are below that threshold, such as alcohol that governments don't ban. I think cigarettes kind of fall along with alcohol. There are things like drugs which governments decide to ban. They've set that threshold for us, and I think that's a threshold that you have to either uphold or tell us why it's wrong.
You said that only economic risk is associated with gambling, right?
Yeah, I mean, economic risk can lead to other things. It can lead to other problems, pulling apart families, as we talk about, but you kind of
So you can
increase the
see-
problems of in your case by killing a business.
So you can see that there can be some very detrimental effects to families, like you just said, pulling apart families.
Yes, things
There
can
can
happen,
be.
but it all
Just
stems,
like there is with
wait,
alcohol use.
Sorry, it all stems from the losing of money. Alcohol abuse, it can stem from the fact that you are actually mentally impaired, and that pulls apart your family.
Does
you are
it-
losing money in this
does
instance,
it
and that is where the problems stem
matter-
from, and we cannot forget that.
Does it matter if two things have different causes but lead to the same end?
Yes, it completely does matter, because the point is, and it matters especially for our case, because what you're saying outweighs our impact 1,000 times more on the negative side, because you're killing a business which will do the exact same things. If you're saying the cause doesn't matter, you're killing a business creating the same effects, and the cause, if it doesn't matter, then you're just doing it more and more and more, and we see a bigger impact for our side.
You said that the gambling industry is very prosperous, the online gambling industry,
Mm-hmm.
so thus you wouldn't ban it. So
That's not the only reason, but that's
yeah,
one.
of the reasons. If the drug industry could also be very prosperous, would you then legalize it?
Well, the point is, and this is very different. The drug industry is underground. It's illegal right now. When we see a online gambling website, it is a business. It is something that can happen out in the open. It has corporations. It gives people jobs. It employs people in a way with contracts that is actually legal. So what we see is you're destroying a company with many levels.
If the drug industry was legalized and also had these safeguards, would you then legalize it?
Yeah, if that's what it was like, if it had a
So you
business
would-
that
you
was
would
legal and out in
legalize
the
it.
open. Yeah.
So
But
the
you have to
only-
remember,
the
it's in
only-
a specific instance.
So the fact that what the reason, let me get this right, the reason you're okay with online gambling is because it's legal.
Yep. I mean, the part of the thing is that we have to see the situation we're in now. When you ban something, because you're doing something that you're changing the status quo, correct? So we have to look at the negative effects of changing the status quo.
You talked a lot about a threshold that we need to set.
Yes.
How far should it go? Like what
That's up to
exactly do
you.
you mean? That's up to us.
Yeah, you need to show us a threshold. You need to prove that that online gambling is above that threshold.
Do you think it's hypocritical for the government to raise taxes on cigarettes but not ban cigarettes?
To raise that. No.
It's not hypocritical.
No.
Time's up.
Right?
How much time do we have?
Okay.
time to be again?
2 minutes and 50 seconds.
The only thing that we've heard from Team Negative is that the only reason why you should not ban online gambling is because gambling exists in the real world as well. We don't think that that is a positive enough reason for you to not ban something. Just because offline gambling exists doesn't mean that you can't ban online gambling. And that's the only thing that they've talked to you about. They haven't given you any positive constructive material for telling you why why online gambling should be banned. The only thing they've said is because you can't ban it because it already exists. is because it's already legal. So we're changing that, and we gave you reasons for why we're changing that. Let's talk about the first thing. We came up here and we said that our job as a government is to strike a balance between giving people freedoms and restricting the harms or protecting them from certain harms. And we said that in a world where you have both online and offline gambling, as compared to a world where you only have online gambling, which restricts or mitigates the harm to some extent, you are restricting the harm, you are like lessening the harm, while at the same time giving the people the freedom to enjoy it as a leisure activity. And that is something that they haven't tackled, because we have proven to you that there is less harm. They've questioned us on the threshold. They've said that we haven't given you any direct threshold. Firstly, we believe that it varies from case to case. You don't have one absolute threshold for drinking, smoking, gambling, and all things that are present in the real world. Even in court, ladies and gentlemen, every court case is different, and you take all of those factors into account when making a decision. In this case, we said that the harms of online gambling, which make it easily accessible, which means that it is easier for people to lose money, it is easier for people to gamble away their entire life savings, something that they call only monetary harm, but we see as ruining your entire life, going broke, having no money to earn food, having no money to go to work, having no money to feed your children. These are big harms, ladies and gentlemen. These are significant harms. They have trivialized it as only monetary harm. This is a big harm, and if you allow people easier access to go and commit this activity and incur this harm, then we think that you need to restrict that. Now let's talk about the things that they have talked to you about. They came up here and the first thing they said was that it is hypocritical of the government to allow offline gambling because it says that you have a shift in policy. Now the harms they outlined was that it decreases legitimacy and it undermines its purpose. We don't think that it is hypocritical, because even in the status quo, you ban public smoking. Does that mean that the government loses its legitimacy? Because on one hand it's saying that you can smoke, but you can't smoke in public. This doesn't happen. What happens is that the government tells you that yes, you might be able to do something, but we do not approve of it. It is harmful for you. You need to restrict access to it. And that doesn't mean that your government is hypocritical or it loses legitimacy. Their second point was about how it is less dangerous. They told you how your senses are overwhelmed in real casinos because they're serving you alcohol. Can't you drink beer in your house while you're playing online poker or any such things? This doesn't mean that alcohol isn't available to you in your house. They said that your friends are there, and which makes you stay longer, and that closing a window is easier. Let's get something straight. We assume and we know for a fact that gambling is addictive. So if gambling is addictive and you're in a comfortable environment in your home where you're lying on your couch with your laptop on your lap, your drinks right next to you, and you're in a comfortable setting and you don't have this urge that you need to go back home because your wife or your kids are waiting, you're more comfortable there, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why it's because it's addictive, it's not as easy to close that window because you're more comfortable in that particular setting. And so we feel that these harms, that is actually more dangerous. Now they said that the reason why you can't close down this industry is because people will lose jobs. If you ban prostitution in a particular country, prostitutes will go out of jobs. Does that mean that you don't ban prostitution? Ladies and gentlemen, you as a government take a moral stance. People do not have one job for the rest of their life. If they lose this job, they will find another one. But you as a government need to protect them from the harms of this particular policy. The last thing that they mentioned was, why are you punishing people? They didn't know it was illegal to create these websites. Well, now we're telling them it's illegal, so shut them down. So this harm doesn't exist as well. Now let's move on to the counter refutations that they gave. Within this, they said that you can't ban every strategy that puts money at risk. We realize that, which is why this balance comes in. We realize all these things. We are a pragmatic government. We realize that you can't maybe ban every strategy. You can't ban people from going and spending money on alcohol, but you do need to restrict that to some extent, and we are restricting that. The last thing they talked about is how, with the ease of fake IDs, they never tackled this argument of how we gave you certain harms. We said that if in a country gambling is banned, then that person can simply use a proxy and go and access online gambling. That is directly breaking its own domestic laws. On a second level, ladies and gentlemen, the harms are greater in this case because while you might have regulations in your country to regulate online gambling, maybe in a Caribbean country, you don't have those same regulations. And so if you go to those websites, those websites might be able to exploit you. For all these harms, vote for me in Pakistan.
So if two things happen differently, but they have the same outcome, as we talked about in the last crossfire, are they equally detrimental?
We said if they have the same outcome.
Mm-hmm.
It varies from case to case. Give me a specific example.
Well, your partner was kind of advocating for this in the last crossfire. If two things happen, like for instance, smoking and gambling, in the end, both people end up dying. One loses money and like goes homeless and dies, and one person dies from the long-term bodily effects. Is the outcome equally as detrimental?
That is, yes, that is why you restrict smoking.
Okay, so if the
innocuous
outcome of
gambling.
gambling is the same as the outcome of putting your money in a bad investment, should we ban bad investment? Should we ban investing as a system?
See, you're assuming that in the real world, governments have to take two extremes. Either they have to completely ban something, or they have to go for something completely.
Well,
you have to strike a balance.
Right.
You have to give your people freedoms and restrict them and protect them at the same
but
time.
the resolution is asking you to ban something, correct? So you can't just say, well, we'll restrict
It is
something.
asking us to ban online gambling.
Right.
We're still allowing
So-
gambling. We're only restricting.
So again, if you're choosing to ban this thing, which has the equal effects of this other thing, isn't it only fair to say that you would ban that thing as well? Why would you restrict that instead of ban it if it has the same detrimental effects?
We've told you countless times that your government has to give your people certain freedoms, while at the same time protect you from certain
Okay.
harms. That is why you allow people to smoke but ban public
All right,
smoking.
thank you. So you talk about how you can just drink beer in your house. Is there a difference between drinking at your house at your discretion and being in an overwhelming environment that encourages you to drink alcohol?
For instance, in a bar, if you drink too much, the bartender might tell you to stop. But in your house, it's at your own discretion, so you can drink until you pass out.
Do you really think that people at a casino are going to ask you to stop when they know that you are mentally impaired and are more likely to spend money in their casino when you drink alcohol?
Yes,
Why would they do that?
because there are certain laws that ask them to do this.
Okay, I'm gonna ask something else. You say that you're lessening the harm by getting rid of one outlet. Does that mean that we don't have to look at the harms of having contradicting policies with getting rid of one outlet but not the other?
These contradictory policies, as you put them, are not that harmful. These aren't contradictory policies. You're telling your people that fine, you have to get some freedoms, but you don't have to get so many freedoms that you start harming yourself. To a great extent.
But wouldn't you say that there's a difference between like restricting smoking and then like banning public smoking? Like those are the same idea. Like basically what we're saying is that wouldn't you say there's a difference between banning one part of something and then not the other thing, then like for instance, like with smoking, you say that, okay, sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. That's not contradicting something. Yeah, of course, that's what I was gonna do. Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay.
How much time do we have left?
1.5.
Thank you. Is everyone ready? Sorry, 1 second. Is everyone ready? I'm going to start my case my speech by going through by first talking about the threshold arguments, second talking about the contradiction between that the government will be making, and third looking at the net harms of banning online gambling. So first, let's go to the threshold. First, I would like to point out that while we are talking about threshold, in our opponent's entire speech, he keeps on bringing up the word restricting. So again, we would like to say that we are not condoning the restricting. We are not condoning the idea of restricting online gambling, just banning it. So that is going to be showing you that, once I tell you about this threshold idea, you're going to be seeing why there's no reason why we can't just restrict online gambling, not just not ban it. If we restrict online gambling, you are still going to be, if you are buying the idea of restricting online gambling and not banning it, you are still going to negate. But let's go to the threshold idea. We frame the debate around an extremely important threshold. The clearest reason we are going to be winning this debate is because they concede that they fail to meet this threshold by not giving one. There's a distinction between restricting and banning. They agree that the government only restricts things like smoking and drinking, yet they present no reason why we should jump the bridge from restriction to banning. Online gambling never meets the threshold because they don't prove online gambling is as bad or worse than drugs. But even so, even if you aren't buying that, I would say that they only say that the difference between drugs and the drug industry. They say that we would get rid of the drug industry. We would bring back the drug industry if it brought back jobs, and because of that threshold. But the problem there is that the drug industry does not meet the threshold in the first place. If you meet the threshold, then banning the industry would be more detrimental. But insofar as the drug industry does not meet the threshold, there's no reason to be looking there. Second, I would say they say that the threshold can vary from case to case when they try to get out of dodging the bullet between giving us a threshold. But the problem is the threshold does not vary with drugs. In terms of drugs, all drugs are banned. But because they haven't given us a threshold and proven that they don't meet the threshold, then you are going to be banning online gambling. But even if you're not looking there, I would say that the next part that we're going to is the contradiction. So let's go to the contradiction idea on the top of the negative case. At the top of the negative case, we say that it is going to be contradictory because the government is allowing offline gambling, but not online gambling. And there are many problems there. So first, they say restricting it is different than banning it, such as smoking, right? When they give the example of smoking, the problem there is that we ban smoking in public because it affects the safety of others. Other people can get harmed because of secondhand smoke. But the problem there is online gambling only affects yourself and your family, so there's no reason to restrict it or ban it. In their case, ban it, but we wouldn't be restricting it anyway. But we wouldn't be banning it anyway. So then let's go down to the second argument about how they say that a government is saying that online is okay, but the problem. Saying that offline is okay, but online isn't. And then we go into the differences between online and offline gambling. In a casino, people are the casino is going to be trying to get you more intoxicated. Whereas if you're at home, you're more likely to stop drinking when you know you're very intoxicated. But even if you're not buying that, there are differences in the senses. At a casino, you're smelling alcohol, you're smelling food, you're enticed by the employees there that are trying to get you to drink more and to stay in the casino. Whereas even if it is hard to close out of a window, it's always going to be harder to leave a casino. But even if you're not buying that argument, I would say that even if, sorry, they say that's a second argument on our side. And then on our third argument, we talk about how it kills a business. Again, it has to meet the threshold before you can decide whether or not it would just destroy an entire industry. We don't allow prostitution because that does not meet the threshold. But then we would ban that industry. But because online gambling does not meet the threshold, we wouldn't ban the industry even so, because it would allow for a loss of an industry. So those are the contradiction arguments. Now let's go over to the affirmative side of the flow. And we're going to be showing you why we're going to be winning off of these net harms. So their first contention is talking about how, let's actually go through the net harms and loss of, that could happen to you when you online gamble. When you online gamble, again, they say that two things that have the same effect we should ban both. If two things have the same effect, they're equally detrimental. So let's look at the example of the stock exchange. If you look at the stock exchange, you can invest all your money in the stock exchange if you're uninformed, and then you would lose all your money and you would destroy your family. But the problem there is, if you do that same thing in online gambling, you lose all your money and you destroy your family. The problem there is we wouldn't ban investing your money in the stock exchange. We would just restrict it and make sure that people, if anything, we would restrict it and make sure people are more informed. But we don't even do that. We just allow people to make their own decisions as long as we assume that they are informed. Again, off of the idea of security, we would say that they don't respond to these ideas, but we would say that you can they don't respond to this, but you can always track people back with their IP addresses. And second, we would say that you can still go to a club if it's offline, but you can still go to a club with a fake ID. So those are non-unique. For all these reasons, we urge a con ballot.
Can we just take some breath?
They requested press.
Okay, yeah.
You said that it is contradictory to have offline gambling and yet allow gambling online, right?
Yes.
So if a country bans gambling, country bans casinos, then is it okay to ban gambling online?
I mean, you can't switch your advocacy and say that we're only going to be banning online gambling in countries where banning is legal.
If a country bans casinos, is it then legitimate for that country to ban online gambling?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So,
but that would not be
all
an
right.
entire reason to affect.
Are there harms to online gambling?
I mean, sure, there can be some harms
Sure,
to online gambling, but
they
don't meet the threshold for banning.
All right. So in both worlds, harms exist. In fact, in our world, harms are significantly reduced because we're banning one avenue for harm, right?
No, we completely disagree. We're saying that you're not first, you can look at the arguments that say that gambling in a casino is going to be much worse than gambling online.
All right.
Second, you could say
in
that
both cases, even if we concede that online gambling is worse, is online gambling bad altogether?
No.
So it has no harms at all?
I mean, it has some harms, but just because something has some harms does not mean it is bad altogether.
All right. So in which worlds are harms reduced greatly?
In our world.
How?
Harms are reduced greatly. First,
online gambling is harmful. We're banning it. You're allowing casinos and online gambling to exist. Where are the overall harms? In which world are the overall harms?
When you're banning
reduced?
the entire industry of.
So you're okay with banning the entire industry?
No.
Why not?
Can I answer your question?
Yes.
You asked where the harms are coming from in your world. We're saying when you ban the entire industry of online gambling, first you're affecting all of those that are participating in that. You're affecting, there are many more people that are going to.
All right, sir, I understand your question. I understand your answer.
Okay.
Tell me, you said that it is easy to deceive someone in a casino, right?
Yes.
All right, so if I am a 14-year-old and I walk into a casino, how can I deceive the person to believe I'm 22?
I mean, you don't have to be 14, but we would say that.
All right, so
can I answer your question, please? Yes. I have two responses. First, I would say that you can be 17 or 18 or 19 or 20. Once you're above 18, you're allowed to gamble in some countries.
But there's a high risk of deception in your.
But we would say that that's because of it's.
But there is, right? Yes or no?
Because there's a risk. Parents it's their parents' responsibility. In the same business.
All right. So there will be a risk. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but there are other risks that are going to outweigh severely.
All right. So what are these other risks that are going to outweigh them severely?
I mean, the industry, economic, just ability between the.
So the only reason to not limit this is economic harm?
No, industry, of the government, like stability and the respect of the government.
Is every government dependent on casinos for its majority of income? So how will the economy
No,
collapse?
I never talked about income. I'm saying.
But you said that the economy will be.
I said okay. The economy isn't just about the government. Like they don't get income from these casinos, but that's.
So there are no other jobs available for these people.
I mean, they get taxes from these, but like that doesn't mean that it's going to be completely effective.
All right, thank you.
But there are many other risks that are going to outweigh.
I'm just going to take 30 seconds. The burden on team proposition today was to show you two things. Number one, that the government has the right to ban online gambling. And number two, that the government has the need to ban online gambling. And we believe that throughout this debate we have showed you both things. And before we go on to crystallize that, let's establish one thing. We said, ladies and gentlemen, that gambling is bad as a whole. They agreed to that gambling is bad as a whole. They said, yes, gambling has certain harms. We came up here and said that we need to strike a balance, that we don't believe that outrightly banning gambling is the right thing to do because that may be too extreme. We said that yes, we understand that people have certain freedoms and the government should uphold these freedoms, but what we want to do is attempt to strike a balance, and by restricting online gambling, one, we believe that you're disincentivizing gambling as a whole, but in addition to that, ladies and gentlemen, online gambling has some of its very own unique harms that we talked about and that I'll go on to talk about as well, that were completely dropped by side opposition today. Now let's go on to talk about what we said. we said that we need to tell you that the government has a right to ban online gambling. And this was something that was not once contested by team opposition at all. They never said that the government does not have the right to restrict any kinds of freedoms. They never said that the government is not in the correct place to restrict any freedoms, or that they're overstepping their bounds. No, ladies and gentlemen. So we win on the fact that the government has the right to restrict this freedom. If we win on that fact, then we also win on the fact that the government has the right to decide what the threshold is. So in a situation where a government can decide what the threshold is, in a situation where the government can decide that online gambling is too detrimental, ladies and gentlemen, then we clearly have taken this debate. And we as a government believe that we have proven that to you. And let's go on to that right now. The need. Now they came up here and they said that you need to establish a threshold, that online gambling doesn't meet the threshold. But they never really told us why it doesn't meet the threshold, ladies and gentlemen. Since Team Proposition came out here right from the start and told you about some very unique harms, never did they tell us why these harms are not enough to meet the threshold. At times they say prostitution doesn't meet the threshold, drugs do meet the threshold, alcohol does sometimes meet the threshold. So it's been really confusing for us to understand what they mean by this vague term threshold in the first place, and what does meet the threshold and what doesn't meet the threshold, ladies and gentlemen. And secondly, we believe that the threshold also differs from instance to instance and from country to country. In certain countries, the problem of online gambling is worse. In certain countries, it's not as bad, ladies and gentlemen. But also, in certain places, gambling as a whole is banned. In those places where gambling as a whole is banned, would they then allow online gambling to be banned as well? We had no answer to that at all. But let's go on to reiterate some of the things that we brought out in our constructive material that was not touched upon by Team Opposition. We said, ladies and gentlemen, that online gambling is easy to access. You might not even be somebody who's prone to gambling, but you're simply browsing a website and you have all these advertisements for gambling and online casinos coming up. It is just literally a click away. You might not be someone who tomorrow is going to wake up and go to a casino, but you might just be browsing Facebook or browsing Gmail, and you're going to go and click on that thing just because it looks flashy and interesting. And that's where the problem starts. That's how the addiction starts. And when you start online, then you're going to start going to casinos that still exist in their world, casinos that they still concede are really, really bad, ladies and gentlemen. And the second thing that we said is that online gambling is much more prone to fraud, something that they just shrugged off as unimportant. But why do we say it's prone to fraud? Imagine two situations where somebody who's a 17-year-old goes in with having stolen his father's ID. Now, we understand how genetics works, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to look exactly identical, and the security guard is still going to realize that this person is not who he's claiming to be. Also, he's not 40 years old. So we need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that there are certain tangible security benefits that exist in casinos, in the physical casinos in physical forms. And this is something we tried to tell you right from the start, that gambling and regulation go hand in hand. Gambling has a very, very dirty underbelly. Without regulation, ladies and gentlemen, there would not be gambling as a whole. And why is this? Because people who gamble, not only can they commit fraud, but they're also very prone to become victims to fraud. We also said that in certain countries, for example, in the Caribbean, people don't always require licenses to have gambling websites, so you don't know if they're offering you fair odds and other such problems. And because of that, people from other areas, when they access these websites, they can also fall prone to these kinds of fraud. And the last thing, ladies and gentlemen, why does online gambling have not as bad consequences as gambling in a casino? And why is monetary risk not going to lead to things such as depression, not going to lead to things such as your family breaking apart? We believe that if you spend all your son's college savings on gambling and risking your money, that is going to lead to some very, very serious consequences. So because we proved to you two things, that the government has a right, ladies and gentlemen, and that there is a need, and they've not offered you any positive constructive material telling you why you should not ban it, but only the fact that it already exists and that it's legal, vote Pakistan.
Oh, can you pass me my water bottle? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, are you ready? Ready? There are three main clash points in this debate. The first one is the threshold argument, the second one is the contradiction argument, and the third one are the net harms arguments. The easiest way to vote for us is through the threshold argument, but let's go there first. So the first argument the threshold argument is very important because we're saying that there has to be a threshold by which the government decides when can we ban something and when do we not ban something and when do we just restrict something. Let's take us back to the very first cross-examination when I asked them about the threshold for banning something. The problem is they say the word restriction over and over again. Remember, the resolution is asking us to ban online gambling, not just restrict it. This is very problematic because they use examples of things like smoking and drinking, which have negative effects that are similar to things like online gambling. The problem is they say that the government only restricts things like smoking and alcohol. By the same line of logic, we would only restrict online gambling. We wouldn't ban it. They haven't met the threshold. The threshold is showing that the harms of online gambling are just as bad as things that are illegal, such as recreational drugs, or even worse than things like recreational drugs. They never meet this threshold. That is the burden we set up for them. However, they present us with two burdens. First, they have to show that they have a right to the government has a right to ban it, and second, they have to show that the government needs to ban it. They never prove that the government needs to ban it. They might prove that the government needs to restrict it, but not to ban it. But let's go through their arguments. First, they say that they have to strike a balance by restricting. Remember, the resolution asks us to ban it, not restrict it. Third, they say that the government has the right to set a threshold. They have set a threshold, and they have to meet that threshold, but the opposing team never meets that threshold. Their fourth argument is that it's inconsistent. And quote, they say a government can decide, and quote, it varies from country to country. If it varies from country to country, then we wouldn't ban it, and we wouldn't create a blanket statement and say we should ban it in all countries. They are contradicting themselves when they say it varies from country to country and it's always inconsistent. So this is the first voting issue, the threshold argument. They never meet the threshold for when a government has a right to ban something. Then the second main argument is about net harms. This is divided into two things. A point is online gambling versus offline gambling, and B point is the economic harms. The main debate is on the online versus offline in terms of casinos. First, they say that it's easier to access when it's online because it's a click away. The problem is they don't respond to the arguments about the external influences in a casino. The environment of a casino is designed to make sure you continue to gamble, that you continue to put money in the slot machine so that the casino can profit off of the risks that you're taking. You are also served drinks. Remember, when you're gambling online, you can't be served drinks. The entire environment is tailored towards you so that you will continue to gamble and continue to spend money there. Then they make the argument about how if people become addicted to gambling, then they'll go to casinos. This is a huge contradiction because if they ban online gambling, the only place you can go gambling left is casinos. They're saying that online gambling is going to cause people to go to casinos, but if we ban online gambling, you can only go to a casino. Then their last argument is about the underage gambling problem. But first of all, we make the argument about the fake ID and how it's non-unique because in both worlds there are going to be some people who maybe it's illegal for them to go gambling, but they'll pass through the inspection. And second, I would say that for children who are physically, if it's impossible for a child to be over the age, then obviously those aren't the children who are going to be doing the online gambling in the first place. Do you see a 7-year-old going online gambling and stealing a parent's credit card? That's That's ridiculous. Finally, the third level debate is totally ignored by the opponents, which is the contradiction argument. This is a violation of principle. This argument is in our case. It talks about how the government is contradicting themselves because they say that you could that offline gambling is legal while online gambling is not legal. This is very problematic because when a government is inconsistent, they cannot govern their people. They lose government legitimacy, and people have no incentive to listen to their government. They completely concede this argument in the last speech. They never bring up their arguments again about banning smoking and their other examples. They agree that this is an argument. So the round is very easy to break down. First is the threshold argument. They never meet the threshold for when the government has the right to ban something. They say that they have to prove a right to ban something and a need to ban it. They don't prove those things. They might prove that there's a need to restrict online gambling, but there's no need to ban online gambling. We're clearly winning the threshold argument. If they can't prove that they meet the threshold, then that's enough to vote for us. But second is the contradiction argument, which they don't touch upon at all in their last speech. This argument is an impact for why this is going to be bad for the people and the entire country. And third is the reason why online gambling is always going to be better than offline. So I urge an affirmative ballot. A negative ballot, sorry.
Feel free to cross the aisle, shake hands, and wait for the decision in the auditorium.